Uh, what do you say we get things
Yeah,
started? Well,
let's jump in. So as Mike said, welcome to the webinar. This idea of the scaled agile lean, the safe lean agile principles illustrated. Couple of housekeeping things as we get going. So a lot of questions we get when we do these webinars. Is there material that we're going to get afterwards? The good news is, heck yeah, and you don't even have to wait till the webinar to be finished. All the information, all of the stuff we're going to talk about that we're going to do here is already available to you at the scaledagileparamework.com. Safe Lean Agile Principles is the article that will link to all of these different principles that we're gonna go through. So you don't need anything from us. Go to the source, go get the information. The benefit of SAFE, one of the things we're going to talk about is this framework is continually evolving. It's the collective experience and wisdom. The body of knowledge is ever expanding, ever deepening, and that's a really useful thing. And the outcome that we're looking for this webinar is not to teach you what the principles are, right? We're hopeful that you already understand the principles. If not, then we can have a conversation afterwards, maybe put some in the chat, and we can come back and help you get a deeper or a fundamental understanding of the principles. But how do you make them live in your real world? You know, there's not a single class that we've done in engaged agility. There's not a single organization that when we've been partnered and helping them learn better ways of working, where we haven't had on a constant basis, how do I, what does this mean? And invariably, when we do this, when we start talking about the organizational change involved in leveraging SAFE, is how do you understand these principles? Because these are the ways that you nuance SAFE. These are the ways you make the rubber hit the road in your organization and start getting the benefits that SAFE's it touts, and I think rightly so. So the nod here as we go through these is to talk a little bit about the principles. We're going to do this in a lightning format round. We're going to do about 3 minutes per principle. So for the next 30 minutes or so, you get to watch me get kind of excited because there's a passion around this. I think for all of us at EA, we're passionate about organizational design and transformation, change agency, as well as we find significant value in the framework. So marrying those two together, buckle in, we're going to do this. And as Mike said, we're going to save time for the questions, answers. You can ask questions in the interim. Phil and Mike have graciously volunteered to watch that chat and answer any specific questions you may have. And then at the end of the session, we'll come back and have a little bit of a conversation around what questions you might have. So with that, let's jump in. We're going to go through all these 10 principles. Phil, if you would be so kind, keep me honest, and let's try to do a 3-minute timer on each of these, just so that we can get through all 10 in the half hour and get folks back from the webinar, back from lunch in a timely manner. And two other things. One, these principles, much like the Agile principles that you're probably already aware of, they're interconnected. You don't do these things in isolation. You don't take an economic view without integration, building incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles, making value flow without interruption. When you do one thing, it shows up somewhere else. And we'll talk a little bit about that in our conversation today, as well as this nod of organizational design transformation, finding better ways of working. There's this paradigm that we find ourselves in all the time, and this is just the way it works. Thinking differently requires us to act differently. In order to act differently, we need to think differently. So which came first, chicken or egg? And it doesn't matter. The idea here is the knowledge, that the information, the thinking differently that is available to you via the scaledagileparamework.com website, these principles. You need to internalize it. You need to understand what that means so that you can begin acting differently, or maybe continue or further how you act differently. As you act differently, you're going to see the world in a new way. You're going to say what's possible from here, and maybe something that wasn't possible before becomes possible now. So again, as we go through these principles, just understand it's not set in stone. They need to show up in your world in constructive ways and generative ways that you figure how you can move the system forward. And as you move the system forward, you should revisit the principle and say, what's next? What am I thinking? All right, so with that, let's kick off this idea. The first principle, take an economic view. This one permeates. This is a great example of the complexity of these SAFE principles. You can take an economic view, of course. Now that's very simple. But then when you start thinking about it, you start unpacking it, it starts getting pretty deep pretty quickly. And what SAFE is calling out here is the idea that you need to be able to understand what your value proposition is, and you need to be able to deliver that value incrementally. You need to be able to, rather than do this big bang, this huge solution that we're going to go put out in the world and then reap the benefits for, we need to be able to put out a little bit of that benefit or that solution, a little bit more. Pick the money up off the table, if you will. So what can we build that somebody would buy and gives us the opportunity to fund more? And we'll come back that incremental delivery shows up in other principles in terms of how do we learn, how do we evolve. But the nod here is, in order to understand how do we pick money, how do we pick value up from this delivery, is we have to have an economic framework. We have to understand this idea of how do we do our investment? How do we make sure that we're creating a system where we have enough flexibility that we can leverage the investment? We have to have this understanding of a economic framework and critically, the trade-offs between the elements of this economic framework. This idea of how much is it going to cost us? What's our value proposition? What's the total cost of ownership? Risk. It's not the thing we talk about. It's the trade-offs in our world that does. You have to be able to sequence value effectively, and you have to work with your suppliers. This doesn't happen in a vacuum, especially at enterprise scale. There's a context in which you operate today that you have to be able to tend to. And with that, then kind of talking about some examples, this idea, so what would take an economic view look like in the real world? And think maybe of this idea of a regional bank. They're getting ready to roll out a platform replacement for a core solution. And as they're thinking about what they're going to do here, they're all thinking about what's the total cost of ownership here? How are we going to build this out? How do we put this out into the world incrementally? We don't want to just go say, here's the new solution for our banking. Maybe we want to build out the loan infrastructure first because we can leverage some new markets that we haven't seen there. Maybe we can go out and build out this idea of let's go build this really critical, this maybe fragile idea of backups. Maybe the first thing that we need to do incrementally is deliver this idea of our collecting information, backing up our information, because our current system is pretty fragile around that. The idea is you understand what the economics are, you understand what the work is, and then start sequencing that work accordingly, right? Another example might be this idea of taking, you're building an application that you want to get new solution requests from an existing market. As you're building out that market, as you're building out that solution, understand the value proposition. So what are we doing with these solution requests? Instead of just having this idea of this team's going to build it and we're off to the races, understanding what's the cost of building it, what's the cost of supporting it, what's the cost of maintaining that. If we have this third party build it and it doesn't comply with our current solutions, what does that cost us? What does that do? So this idea, take an economic view. All right, then let's go on. Let's continue on. Number 2, applying systems thinking. The Deming quote that SAFE calls out here, and we certainly bring it up in our classes, is this idea from the system of the system must be managed. Left to themselves, the components become selfish, competitive, independent profit centers, thus destroying the system. The secret is the cooperation between the components towards the aim of the organization. And boy, there's a lot in there. There's this idea that we're not inherently evil. Our teams aren't selfish, but if we don't tend to the larger view, if we don't tend to the larger system, they can be self-directed. They can be optimized towards themselves versus the larger aim of the organization. So in order to start unpacking that, what SAFE is calling out is this idea that the system has multiple definitions, multiple meanings. The system could be a solution. The system could be a call center solution, call center software is a solution. And amongst that solution, you have the actual call center interface that the call center people use. You might have some level of training. You might have reporting. It's all of the artifacts. It's all the things that we build to make that solution useful. That's a system. Another definition of the system is the enterprise itself. A team is a system. An agile release train is a larger system composed of these systems teams. A North American division is a larger system. So when we say applying system thinking, we need to be able to understand and nuance that lens. Are we talking about the solution as a system? Are we talking about the people and the group that's building that solution? And in order to apply this system thinking, what SAFe says is you need to understand the full value streams. And again, this will show up in later principles as well, but you need to be able to know your operational value stream and your development value streams that are servicing that operational value stream in order to fully understand the system and leverage the collective whole of a systems thinking. So with that, let's talk a couple of examples of applying system thinking. And let's start with this idea of a solution as a system and go back to that call center application. In an example of applying system thinking could be, say, for example, you have a call center where your customers are getting a little bit frustrated. You're not getting the return, the quickness, the response that they're looking for. Maybe you're losing some revenue. Maybe you're incurring additional internal costs around a call center because of the delay. And the reason for that is the data that's getting entered maybe isn't complete. It's not fully verified. It's not fully accurate. And a solution without systems thinking, you might say, oh, we need to go put some tooling in place where the people entering the data have to validate it. We do double entry, and maybe that's it. But maybe from a systems viewpoint, you go back and think, it's the problem is manifesting itself down here when we try to use the data, but it's happening up here earlier in the system when we're entering the data. Maybe rather than modifying the system, what we need to do is do better training. Maybe we need to create a set of videos or information for the call center people so they fully appreciate why we need to have good data and how that data flows through the entire system. And then another example is system as the enterprise. If you've ever been in a merger or an acquisition, it's not, hey, we bought you, thanks a lot, we're good, go ahead and do your thing, feed your data into ours, feed your sales solution into our large component, and we'll consume you. It's more than that. You have to merge the cultures. You have to pay attention to the people. You have to understand, if we bring this group in, what changes within our system. And leadership and business spends time understanding, well, what does this do to our dynamics? What does this do to our footprint in the different regions? What does this do to our internal departments? What does this do to our internal capabilities? Let's have a plan for, as we bring these folks together, how we keep the system running and increase the system's capabilities. And with that, let's keep going then. Assume variability and preserve options. So these next couple are tightly related. These next couple of principles tightly coupled. So assume variability, preserve options builds on this idea of the cone of uncertainty. And that's saying that as we build a solution, as we start working towards providing some value to our customers, we're learning along the way. And in order to leverage that, so we know that variability happens. It's neither good nor bad. We can't diminish variability. We can't plan our way around variability with a single point in solution. Say, this is such a great design, we don't need to worry about variability. Variability is going to happen. What we need to do to address that is understand that we don't want to make all of the decisions up front. As we're building the solution, we're going to be learning. So as we're building our solution, that this top line of the cone of uncertainty means we're starting building things that we need to maintain. The bottom line is, hey, we're learning more things. So if we're going to be learning as we're building, and we are, let's make it so that we can preserve our options to what Agile would call the last responsible moment. SAFe is saying, we need to make sure that we have the option to continually adjust our solution as we go. And that requires capabilities. That requires a level of understanding, a level of architecture, a level of understanding value that most organizations have to evolve to, have to bring in. But again, it's a nod to variability that's going to happen. What do we do around that? So a couple of examples illustrating this one. in the real world, non-IT, right? A retail chain's getting ready to do a holiday promotion. Rather than saying, hey, we're going all in on the web promotion this year, they say, you know what, let's do a little web. Let's do some storefront sales. Let's do a little referral. We don't know necessarily what's going to happen, but as we're getting our data out there, as oh look, we're getting a lot of responsiveness on the sidewalk sales brochures. Let's start using more of that. Let's start leveraging that. Let's start pouring more resources into that type of the promotion. It's learning as we go. We didn't commit all in at the beginning, so we can adjust as we need to. And you see this in an IT, this idea of assuming variability, preserving options in an IT realm when you're doing a database migration. You're moving from an application from on-prem into the cloud. You don't go out and say, we're going to do all of this database with all of this security components, with all of this communication and all of this redundancy. You create the architecture in such a way, you say, let's go do a test. Let's see, is AWS better than Oracle? But for our instances, what's going to happen? For security components, what's out there that we can use? And you test and learn, and you design the solution so that as you're building that out, you can verify what's going to be optimal for you, and then start committing and leveraging it from there. With that, then let me keep going. Let me talk about this idea of building incrementally fast with integrated learning cycles. So the nod here is if we are assuming variability and preserving options, boy, we better be learning, because if we're not, it's going to be hard. And SAFe is calling out this PDCA cycle, the plan, do, check, adjust cycle, and the need at enterprise scale to create this learning organization. So if a team has a discovery, how do we disseminate that quickly across the enterprise and leverage that to our advantage across the enterprise? If we have this overarching guidance that we have to have for compliance, how do we make sure that everybody's aligned to it? Well, and in our solutions that we're building, here's the build incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles. And the idea is that we are constantly learning. We're constantly needing to validate what we're building, validate that it is working, and we want to make sure that we're able to do that on a consistent basis. So what SAFe is saying is the construct of iterations, of planning intervals, of PIs, that and again, we'll see this when we get to cadence and synchronization. We can use that construct. We can use this idea of team of teams to build a learning organization, to make sure that we understand, the rigor here is understanding what we plan to do, that we are then able to do that consistently. We know how we're going to measure it and check, and then we can adjust accordingly. And a couple of examples for this is this idea from an e-commerce platform, for maybe rather than building out an entire e-commerce platform, we build out a small component and we say, hey, are we getting the customer results that we wanted? Are we getting the idea of customer engagement? Are we building out the nod here of revenue? So the idea of the pirate metrics. If we built something and customers start using it, will they come back and they start giving us revenue and pay for that? We don't commit to building the entire thing up front. We understand what we're trying to learn. So do customers want this? Will customers pay for it? How much will they pay for it? How much will they not pay for it? And we continually learn as we're doing the solution. It really is the embodiment of the Eric Ries's lean startup cycle, in a way, in terms of constantly learning what we're building and is it working. Let me then move on, just keep ourselves on track here in terms of time. This idea then of we're learning, we're constantly evolving, we're assuming variability, we're building and learning with these the integrated learning cycles. Now we still need to maintain, we still need to have a check-in, we still need to have some oversight and present base milestones on objective evaluation of working systems. What SAFe is saying here is that in a traditional project management, and this idea of phase gates, of saying, hey, look, we know what we're going to build, we're going to go design it, and then we're going to go build it, and then we're going to go test it. That model kind of falls apart in the world today because of the variability that's ever present. But we still need to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. What SAFe says is on these regular intervals, on these regular cadences, we should check in and we should have objective evaluation of working systems, not the objective evaluation of our requirements document, of this solution that we're building. And we should have a lens when we're looking at it of three different aspects, if you will. We should have our progress. Hey, of all the stuff that we want to build, of all the solution, the things that we hope this solution does, where are we at? Are we halfway through? We're about halfway through the budget, about halfway through what we thought our calendar, but progress. Are we there? Product. Are people using it? Is it useful? Are people getting the value? How do we know? And that's a nuanced conversation, because now we have to understand how we measure value. We don't just build things and hope they work. Going to this idea of plan, do, check, adjust, we need to understand what we're going to check against so that we can adjust. So are the customers wanting it, the customer centricity? And this last one, the process. If we're going to be continued to develop these systems, and we are, as a going concern of any organization, for profit or not, we're a going concern. We want to keep going. Are we getting better? We're always in evolution. Are we evolving or devolving? That's an interesting question. How do we know? Well, on a regular interval, we should be measuring our processes and how we're getting better. And again, it ties tightly into this idea of principle 3, principle 4, and again, principle 7 gives us this cadence and synchronization. As an example, then, this idea of objectives, milestones on objective evaluation of working systems. Think of a healthcare company. Rather than saying, hey, we're going to go build this healthcare solution, we're going to have it done immediately. In December, the doctors are going to be able to put the system, the records into the system and retrieve them. What the group says, what the organization says is, let's focus on getting the doctors the ability to enter and retrieve records with patients there. Let's measure our progress towards that goal in terms of the doctors using it. Is it effective? Are we working our ways predictably toward that? If we want to have that done by December, rather than managing to December, let's manage our functionality and make sure that we're tracking our progress through that. And then, are we getting better on a regular basis? Are we incorporating feedback better? Are we incorporating this idea of the builds out more predictably and effectively? Principle number 5. Principle number 6, making value flow without interruptions. This is a nod to the framework's evolution and to the fact that as we learn and grow together, the framework is no different. The body of knowledge that it incorporates and leverages continues to evolve. And I think one of the benefits of SAFE in particular is the fact that happens. There's a lot of really deep thinking, a lot of really deep reflection that happens and manifests itself in things like the principle 6, its evolution from version 5 to version 6. They've added a couple more properties here under these 8 flow properties. But what SAFE is saying is if you are going to manage flow, if you are going to truly understand and let value flow across an organization, you need to understand things like work in progress and the WIP limits, bottlenecks, and how to address bottlenecks, the handoffs between the departments, the teams, the systems that are doing the work, and how do you minimize the delays within there? How do you get the feedback necessary, those PDCA cycles, and the idea of integrated learning, batch size, optimum batch size, and how do we batch work today? How should we batch work in the future? Managing queue lengths so that we don't overcommit, that we're able to continually adjust. Appreciating the workers, the people do the work. How do we make sure that we're giving them what they need and helping them along? Again, a nod towards lean agile leadership. And finally, the property of policies. Are our policies generative, or are they maybe not generative, degenerative? And this kind of shows up. This is an interesting example. Is if you've ever seen the fast food restaurants, there's a long line at the fast food restaurant in week 1. Another week you drive by and there's somebody out there with a tablet taking orders. That's making value flow without interruptions. That organization say, our bottleneck wasn't that the kitchen couldn't service the orders. Our bottleneck wasn't that we couldn't get the cars through fast enough. Our bottleneck was when the customers came up to the window, they took too long to order and pay. If we put somebody outside in the line, we can start getting that order in faster. We can get a higher throughput. We can get better satisfaction. We can make more money. That's useful. This idea, then, another example of this from an IT perspective of making value flows, and you've probably seen this one if you've ever worked in an organization where you have testing in one division and development maybe reports to another division or another part of the organization. What happens with that is, because there's those different boundaries, those different trade-offs, that batch size is big. The stuff that goes to testing isn't small increments. It's great big batches of work that take a long time to get tested. And when there's information that comes back, well, it takes a long time for that information to come back. When you start making value flow to illustrate that, that's bringing the testers and the developers on onto the same team. They can collaborate. The batch size can go down. The handoffs can go down. And then if we combine that with this idea that we're not asking tests to commit to a 3-month policy or 3-month trade-off of, hey, we're going to do regression testing. Let's figure out how we can constantly do this testing as we go, limiting the amount that we're committing to. Now we're starting to make value flow without interruptions. Next one is apply cadence and cross domain, or apply cadence and synchronize with cross domain planning. Couple of definitions here. Cadence is events happening at a regular occurrence, a common routine. The waiting times are predictable every 2 weeks. If a team is doing Scrum or following safe, lean, agile, every 2 weeks they do their planning, they do their delivery. So I can, if I need something from the team, I don't have to interrupt their iteration. I can say, hey, next iteration, can we maybe do this? Right? It's predictable. I don't have to wonder when I can talk to the team. There's going to be a break at the iteration. Synchronization is all of those cadences happen at the same time. From a safe perspective, this is the idea when you launch a release train, the trains have the same schedule. And the reason for that is because the other principles. We need to be able to integrate and have organizational learning. We need to be able to base our evaluation on the objective, base our milestones on the objective evaluation of working systems. Cadence and synchronization makes that tenable, makes that happen. And again, you'll see this organizationally, exemplifying it. Think of a multinational corporation. They're getting ready to do a major trade show investment, right? We want to have something done for a trade show coming up in the fall. Today, right now, they start figuring out, well, what does that mean for sales? What does that mean for marketing? What do we need to build out? Those folks are planning and collaborating and building on the same cadence so that they're learning together. They're getting the feedback together. You're going to write the check. The same groups are going to do the work. What we're saying is, let's just get into the work on the same cadence and let's synchronize those cadences so that now we've got a better learning organization. Again, it seems simple on the surface, but as we start talking about it and implementing it, it can be a little bit more challenging. Principle number 8, this idea of unlocking the intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers. It's a nod to who we are as humans. So let's do a little bit of definition again, much like the cadence and synchronization. So what is knowledge work? It's based on Peter Drucker's definition. Knowledge work are people that do non-routine problem solving. They're not building widgets. They're solving complicated problems. They need information. That information is nuanced. That information is contextual, right? Knowledge work. It's the stuff that most of us do day to day. And in order to help motivate knowledge workers, we need to understand that there's this thing, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is your pay, your rewards, your benefit. That's important. That's critically important. I think all of us would agree having a paycheck is one of the reasons we get up and go to work, but it's more than that. If we really want to leverage, if we really want to touch the humans, and we do, because I think we all want to make our time on this earth useful and meaningful, we need to attend to the intrinsic motivations of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And it draws specifically the Pink video, Daniel Pink video is available. But the nod here is that as a leader, as somebody in a system, we really want to understand that people need to have some autonomy. We don't need to have a bunch of task takers. We don't need to give people complete direction. We need to provide a little direction, but we need to give people freedom, because that freedom helps them get better mastery. They get better at what they're doing. We all internalize work significantly. So when we're doing that, it's important that we're able to look at the ego self and acknowledge the ego self that we want to get better. And it's not a bad thing to acknowledge the ego self. We do it. And the last one is this idea of purpose, and that's the nod here that what we're doing matters. Everybody wants to understand and take comfort in they're part of something bigger than themselves. And that's this idea of purpose. And it kind of shows up, it's in the real world as an example. This is a true case. Manager we were working with they just stopped doing annual reviews. They realized that the annual review was not very useful, a lot of work that they were doing. Instead of doing annual reviews, this director started having regular check-ins every 6 weeks or so with her direct reports and their direct reports about what their learning journey was. What is their professional development? What is their level of happiness? She started making sure that those people felt included, those people felt heard, and those people were able to take their learning journey. She wasn't telling them what they needed to go learn. She was saying, what do you want from me? Where do you want to go? How can I help you get there? The return on that was her turnover went way down. And every time she needed somebody to join her department when she's getting ready to look for new hires, she didn't even have to put out an ad. She just let the people know. So let's keep the conversation going. This decentralized decision-making, number 9, this is the embodiment. This starts talking to the maturity of all of the other principles as you start evolving your organizations, as you start reaping the benefits of some of the other principles, like, understanding the intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers. You start building this system. Now you have this opportunity to start getting the decisions down to where they belong. That's as close to the work as possible for the appropriate decisions. And what SAFE calls out with this idea is that you need to have a mental model. And again, I would highly encourage you, if you haven't done so, go to the decentralized decision-making and read this white paper. There's certainly more than I would be able to cover in 60 seconds, but the mental model, the consistency of a mental model and how decisions are made are critical, as well as the importance of understanding organizational clarity, and that the people that you're delegating the decisions to have the technical competencies. They know where the organization's going, and they have the skills to make the decisions. That's a critical evolution, and it is an evolution. It is a journey. You just don't, okay, we're going to give you the decisions, off you go, good luck. Nobody's going to do that. And that's not what SAFE is saying. It's that we need to create a system, create an environment where we can grow and have that happen. And it shows itself in the manifestation of an agile release train, maybe, but think of it as an example. Today we have this change control board. There's a group that does the call center, and any modification to the call center has to go to this change control board. So we submit the request from the customer, gets promoted to the change control board. They make the decision. They then disseminate that decision back down to whomever the release trains that are going to do it, and say, okay, you can go build it. We approve it. Rather than doing that, give the release train the autonomy. Say, hey, look, when you get a decision for a change to this solution, you don't need to involve us. Here's some guardrails. If it's significant, if it's over a certain size, if it's going to cost certain money, if it's going to cross certain boundaries, we get to review it. Otherwise, you own the solution. You make that solution. You make that change happen. Use your discretion. Goes back to understanding, autonomy, mastery, purpose, autonomy. We can make our decisions. See how they're related. The last one, I love this. Phil, as we were talking about this, Phil reminded me that principle number 10, new to version 6.0, another nod to the framework is constantly evolving. But what Phil was saying with organize around value was SAFE included that because maybe organizations weren't getting the memo, weren't getting this idea of, hey, you need to organize. You can't leverage all of these other principles unless you create the systems where the right people are present and the right people have the right roles and responsibility, and there's clarity. If you want alignment, you need to organize around value. And this whole manifestation, the idea of SAFE, again, it sounds rather simple, but it's an agile release train. We start talking about effectively organizing around value. What we're talking about is building effective agile release trains consisting of effective agile teams. If we can do that, then we can start more effectively leveraging things like lean portfolio management. Then we get better learning. Then we get better, delivery. As an example, so launching a release train, a real world example of organizing around value, but even more than just launching the release train, leadership paying attention to where the people live. If I start an agile team and I've got 5 people in Chicago, 2 in New York, and 2 in India, are the India people really going to be able to collaborate effectively with this team? Maybe I need to nuance that. If I've got a release train where all of the developments in India and all of my products in the US, are they really organized around value? how are we going to evaluate that? So again, this idea of truly understanding the other principles as we incorporate them and bring them into organizing around value, defining what our operational streams are and streams, aligning and designing release trains is critical. Now, with that, I probably ought to take a breath. Mike, what questions are you seeing in the chat, Mike?
Well, first of all, Martin, great job. That's a lot of information to go through in half an hour, so kudos to you. It was awesome to hear your insight. We haven't had any questions in chat yet, but I do want to invite people at this point to come off camera if you'd like, to come turn your audio on if you'd like to voice a question or put one in chat. So just an open invitation for questions.
Yeah. What principle does your organization struggle with the most, do you think?
That's a great question.
I would say for us right now, it's the whole concept of organizing around value, right?
Yeah.
So, I would love any insight, or thoughts around, we've launched 4 arts and now it's becoming even more clear that the arts are not necessarily organized around value the way they could be. And how you evolve those teams once they've already been established in an agile release train, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll jump into an answer for that, but let me also offer the invitation. We're not going anywhere. Engage Agility. The fact that you signed up for this webinar, you're showing an interest. We're partnered. We're together. If there's more and you want to learn more, we want to dig deeper, shoot us an email, shoot Mike an email, shoot me an email. We'll figure out getting people all to help you evolve that. And that's not us trying to sell services. That's really a give back. EA believes that your time is critical, and our commitment, our appreciation of your time is that we want to help you. We want to help you succeed. Your question about, oh, go ahead, Phil. I saw your hand up. You're muted.
I was to say I can chime in. We give other opinions as well, but go ahead and do yours first, man. For sure.
Yeah, no, please do. So first, what I want to do is I want to celebrate the fact that you've got release trains, and maybe they're not optimal. Okay, but celebrate you can ask that question now, right? Maybe before you started SAFe, we couldn't get any done, and we didn't even know why. Now we could say, hey, you know what? There might be a better way to organize. That's phenomenal. You should absolutely take a lap, because that's organizational design. That's evolution. That's change. And because you can articulate that question, that's progress on the journey. And when you do that, what I would say is, yeah, it's not uncommon when we help organizations, the ability to maybe cross different boundaries, cross different divisions, certainly cross leadership. That's a bridge too far. That change is too disruptive for the organization where it's at. But now that you're having that conversation, it kind of comes back to, well, what are the value propositions that we're doing? So a lot of times when EA is brought in and to help with that, what we want to do is understand, what are your solutions? What is who are the people that support those solutions? What are you building? What are the development value streams? How are you organized today? And then with you all co-create what might the future look like. Don't let folks tell you they have an answer. If any organization comes in and says, I can solve it, I know your problem, I'll fix that, don't trust them. If the idea is, hey, we can help you uncover that, we can do that together, we can discover what the truth is, I think you're on the right thing. Phil, what do you got?
I'll just chime in one thing on that, and then we have another question from chat we'll get to. Hi, Angie. So the idea here is that when you start your journey, ideally you invest in a value stream identification workshop, and that sets you up for the best success. Realistically, that event costs money. It costs people coming in, and the more arts you launch, the less likely people are to invest in that. And so subsequent arts may not get the same love and care that the beginning art did. And that's a pattern that we see sometimes. Having said that, you don't know what you don't know. The interconnections between the teams may evolve in a way that you didn't think. Your market may change, the work may change. And so you've got flow-based metrics that you want to track. As you see bottlenecks, go back to the 8 flow accelerators and see those. And it's not uncommon to say, hey, we're seeing a lot of dependencies between these teams on this art and these teams on that art. Maybe we've got something we need to explore there. The whole reason that business agility's model with SAFe is about this dual operating system where you've got the functional hierarchy who people report to, and you've got the virtual organization where people are organized around value. The advantage of that is that if you need to move teams from one art to another to better align around value, you can. And so that's where I would probably point you, is looking at the flow metrics for your teams and, where are the big dependencies? Because if you have to go off the art, you're probably in a situation where maybe an opportunity to bring people in.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
We've got a question here from Doug. Organization works for the government and is centralized around the customer, to the detriment of stable cadence, letting the customer determine the schedule. Customer meaning the government customer, or the customer meaning the government's customer. If it's the government as a customer, then that's the same challenge you have working with a specific set of executives inside a private sector. It's about helping them understand the impact of flow or ignoring that. But I'll turn it over to Martin. Let's hear what he has to say. He's been an SPCT longer than I have.
There's more than one road to Rome. So there's a lot of different ways to look at these problems. What I think of when I think of the customer setting the schedule. Okay. So what they're doing is they're giving you the critical parameters they have around timeline, around delivery, maybe even around budget. Okay, well, you still develop on the cadence. It doesn't, you've got this milestone event that you have to happen here. Again, this idea of we're gonna have this release for medical software by December. Doctors are going to be able to put the patient records in and be able to pull them back in the office. Okay, sure, that's our target date. We still build towards that, and the nice thing about this is when it becomes unrealistic, when it becomes untenable. Rumpelstiltskin does not work in your organization. You don't get to spin straw into gold or impose wishful thinking, even if the customer doesn't fully understand that. That's that kind of nuance of we have to learn and grow together. But this idea of cadence, of synchronization, of shared learning, now you can start validating it. And if you're truly following the lean, if you understand kind of what the customer's asking for very early on, before there's not time to react, you can have that conversation. Hey, this might not be doable, or we can do this, but you're going to have to come to meet us halfway on scope. We can't build all the stuff that you want. And the idea here is building that relationship. Again, this is the beauty of the framework from my perspective, and why I get so emotional about it is it's trust. It's having lean agile leaders. It's having the discipline to be honest and be able to and build relationships, long-term relationships built on trust. If you don't have that, that's not a framework deficiency. That's an organizational opportunity that you have yet to resolve, that you have yet to take on. And I wouldn't even call it a dysfunction, because I think that's a little pejorative. In our world today, it's not all unicorns and butterflies, but we have to be honest with what we can do and what we can't. What would you add to that, Mike? You've got some exposure and experience.
Well, I was just going to mention, Martin, that we're at time today. So wanted to thank everyone for making time to come and see our webinar. And Martin, you did a fantastic job. So kudos to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for setting it all up.
Yeah, great questions from the crowd. Feel free to reach out to us. You can find us at engagedagility.com, and we'll be happy to connect with you or carry on the conversation. So just want to say thank you to everyone. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.